Welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory. I'm your host, Gary Jacobs. I've done a lot of shows in the past on family law, the court system, and how broken it is in general and how many things need to change. Occasionally we focus on a specific person, a specific rule, a specific judge, something that really needs to change and just can't be done as part of the whole picture. We've done this with other judges such as Judge Blydenberg, who thank God was removed from the bench, and most recently Judge Marion McNulty, who many of us know was just a horrific nightmare, destroyed many lives because she was biased, nasty, incompetent. She was removed from the bench, and we're still working on this because there was a cover-up with the Chief Judge Hinrichs, so they let her retire early. Today we're going to talk about another person in the court system. This isn't a judge, this is a magistrate, a support magistrate. This person is ruling on things that really will affect the lives of children and the non-custodial parents specifically, because she's the person who determines how much they pay. And this woman that we're going to talk about today, Support Magistrate Aletha Fields in Suffolk County Family Court, is just an absolute nightmare. I've seen firsthand her nasty, intimidating demeanor, the fact that she doesn't follow the rules of the court, doesn't follow the rules of the U.S. Constitution and the New York State Constitution. This woman just doesn't care what she does, and she just destroys the lives. It is the opinion of myself and of our guest today that she's also extremely biased against fathers, and that's something that we need to address. My guest today is Don Wiener, and he's been a victim of Aletha Fields, and he's going to tell us his story today. We have some evidence that we're going to put on the screen, but if there's stuff that you want to get more information on, you can contact Mr. Wiener. We'll put his email on the rest of the screen. Welcome, Don, to the program today.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Just so that everybody knows what's going on, just give us a little bit of a contextual history about your case, what brought you to Aletha Fields' courtroom.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to your show, Gary. Let me start by saying 9 years ago, after having a 25-year career, a very successful career on Wall Street, I was a multimillionaire. Today, after 9 years of dealing with divorce courts, Supreme Courts, and family courts, I am now broke, unemployed, basically homeless, living on public assistance. And a lot of this has to do with Support Magistrate Aletha Fields and her biasness towards men. Let me begin by saying it was extremely acrimonious, it was contested, and we went through many years of Supreme Court to determine things of whether there should be custody, whether there should be a divorce, and what kind of financial arrangements. And after many years, the Supreme Court judge, Justice William Kent, determined that Mr. Wiener paid all this money in pendente lite, which is the temporary order of support. He actually called it onerous in his memorandum decision, and he granted me credits towards the permanent order, significant credits for monies that I paid for spousal support, monies I paid for the carrying charges of the marital residence, monies I paid directly for spousal support, for medicine, for other medical insurances and things like that. And in a nutshell, and we'll go into this in detail, Aletha Fields refused to acknowledge any of these credits. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and basically put me in the situation that I'm in now.
So when you say credits, this is money that the judge in his temporary order or his pendente lite said pay it, but it's a lot of money, but don't worry, when we finally figure out what should be paid, you'll get credit for the amount that you overpaid. And that amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It wasn't even amount that I overpaid. It's a temporary order just keeps people in their place. And eventually a permanent order, a judgment comes out that says this is what you need to pay, and it's retroactive to day one. And if it's less than what you had to pay pursuant to the temporary order, you're granted the credits for it. Right. And if it's more than you pay temporarily, then you're going to be in arrears of.
Okay. Which is why we say, by the way, on the show, I tell people all the time, they go to court and the lawyer will tell them, don't worry, this is a pendente lite, it's temporary, it's a temporary number. Don't really worry about it because we'll figure it out. It's a bunch of nonsense, because the reality is it sets the groundwork for the way things are, because the judge will often say, well, he's been paying this all along, so you know what? He could afford to pay it. Or don't worry, at the end, we'll redistribute the amounts, the percentages. The reality of it is, it rarely happens. They say, you know what, just let it go. In your case, though, it should have happened. The judge said it was happened, and basically you're saying this Aletha Fields didn't even follow the Supreme Court order, which is a higher court. She just ignored it and did what she wanted to do.
She not only ignored it, when I tried to raise it as an issue, she barred me from discussing it, and we'll get into more detail about that.
So you say she barred you. Did you have an attorney fighting, saying, hey, I need to put this on the record?
Well, I think we need to take a step back and go to the very beginnings of how I got involved with Aletha Fields, or Support Magistrate Aletha Fields, and you'll then see the context of why I ended up having to be pro se.
Okay, so when one of the questions I had was when your family court attorney couldn't attend the hearing because it was before the appellate division, which in the hierarchy, certainly the appellate division is up here and the family court's here, and somebody like Aletha Fields, who's not even a judge, is way down on the bottom. But what happened when you told the judge that, hey, my attorney can't be here today, he's in a higher court? I'm assuming sent a letter to the court telling them as such.
Well, I had an attorney. I had him for many, many years. He's been my attorney since 2009. He informed me the night before we were supposed to go before Support Magistrate Fields that there is a possibility that he was doing oral argument at the appellate division and to call his office the next morning. I called his office the next morning. His receptionist, his secretary, told me that he definitely was at the appellate division. I informed the court officer when we checked in at family court, and this was at Central Islip Family Court in Suffolk County, that my attorney couldn't be here today. He is presenting oral argument at the appellate division, and he's asked me to get an adjournment date.
Which is common. This is not an uncommon thing. I mean, lawyers have other cases.
Not only do they have other cases, but there is a rule of hierarchy, as you started to mention, that a higher court has a higher precedence of going where the attorney must be. Expecting to have an adjournment slip given to me by the court officer, instead we got called into Aletha Fields' chambers, well, into her courtroom. It's a very small little room. After about 2 hours of waiting, and the support magistrate says, in some substance, and I have the transcripts, Mr. Wiener, we've been waiting for your attorney. I just got this fax to me. Seems that your attorney is no longer your attorney. Isn't that right, sir? And that was a complete surprise to me because I had spoken to him the night before. I spoke to his receptionist that morning. He was my attorney.
Right.
And when I said it was news to me, I didn't know what you're talking about, she handed me a slip of paper, which is a consent to change attorney form. And she said, he doesn't want to be your attorney anymore. You have to sign this. And I was in complete shock.
And when a judge tells you, or not that she's a judge, but we sort of call them judges and they act like judges. So when a judge tells you, you have to sign this, what do? You think that she's telling you the right thing.
Right.
She's certainly not going to give you the wrong information.
Well, I was in shock. Here my attorney was saying he couldn't be here the next day and to get an adjournment date, and she's presenting me with a slip of paper saying he's not my attorney. So reluctantly, I signed it, but I found out later on that story, what she said, wasn't completely true. Because I spoke to the receptionist that next day, or during the lunch break, actually, and I found out that what happened was Aletha Fields wasn't waiting for my attorney. She actually contacted my attorney's office. My attorney's office, the receptionist told her, or told somebody in her chambers, that my attorney was in the appellate division and he couldn't be there, and to please request it, and he requested an adjournment. And her chambers said there will be no adjournment. The trial continues today. If he's not here, we're going without him. So she sort of forced my attorney into enacting this consent to change attorney form.
Well, he didn't want to leave you hanging.
Right.
So he had no choice.
He had no choice, but she stripped me of my right to have counsel.
Right.
And she's completely surprised me. What she could have done is had somebody, when we were outside, hand me the slip of paper so I wouldn't have done it in front of everybody. You have to understand, in her courtroom, not only was I there, not only was the support magistrate there, but my ex-wife-to-be was there, her Child Support Enforcement Bureau supporting attorney was there. There were other people there, and I was highly embarrassed. I didn't know how to react.
And plus, you're nervous when you're in it's normal to be nervous. You're in the court, and you can't really think that fast. You need to take a chance to sit back and say, hey, what do what do I do here? You can't really make that decision on the spot like that, but you were forced to do it.
Right.
So now you have no attorney, you're there, and it's customary for them to say, well, we'll give you 30 days to hire an attorney and come back. Did she give you the 30 days?
Well, after I was somewhat in shock about what was occurring, we had a lunch break. And we came back after the lunch break, and I spoke to a number of attorneys, including my attorney, or my ex-attorney, who it seems like Aletha Fields forced not to be my attorney anymore.
Maybe she didn't want him. Maybe she didn't want him being your attorney. I mean, and nothing would surprise me with this woman.
Nothing would surprise me.
Because she's into
either.
intimidation. We've seen that firsthand.
That's true.
So maybe she didn't like because you had a very good attorney.
Right. And I did, and I love him for it. He's done great things for fighting for righteousness and not only my cause but many other people's causes. And we came back after the lunch break, and I mentioned to her that I'd like to take my 30 days to adjourn the matter to find an attorney.
Right.
And
or decide if you don't want to get an attorney.
Right.
You have that right as well.
That's correct. And I think I actually even said that. I don't know whether I want an attorney, whether I can prepare. I just wasn't.
You may not have the money to get an attorney. I mean,
well, I certainly didn't have much money. And my career and reputation have been destroyed because of a false arrest and a malicious prosecution. And by the way, just as a side note, this was the shirt that I wore on April 2nd in 2009 when I was falsely arrested and maliciously prosecuted. And now there's this massive federal lawsuit where I've survived summary judgment against the police. And
let's hope you have better luck with the shirt today.
Right, and that's another show, right? So I asked Support Magistrate Fields for my 30 days, and she was very strict with me. She belittled me, and then she said, okay, Mr. Wiener, I'll give you your 30 days. We're back here on January 6th. And I quote, but don't find an attorney, hire an attorney on January 5th. Don't hire an attorney on January 4th. Don't hire one on January 3rd.
Who the hell is she to tell
Don't
you when to
hire one
an
December
attorney?
31st.
Listen,
She was
you can
knocking
hire
off
one
my
at
days.
midnight. You can hire one at 8 o'clock in the morning. You have the right.
As I'm walking into her door, I could hire an attorney.
Right. Who is she to tell you you can't?
Well,
that's part of the intimidation, I believe.
That's correct, and it was part of the intimidation. And because of what she did, and because of her biasness towards me, her intimidation, her complete lack of respect for me as a litigant, forget about now, I was now pro se.
Which means representing yourself.
That's correct. I was self-represented. I actually did all the research and wrote a motion to have Support Magistrate Fields immediately recuse herself or disqualify herself.
Because it seems that there's enough evidence there that she can't be impartial. It sounds like for some reason, I don't know what it is that she didn't like. Maybe she didn't like your hair. Maybe she didn't like your unlucky shirt. I personally think she just doesn't like fathers. Because as you know, I've had a ton of people. I won't say a ton, I'll say several people have contacted me, and I've met him outside the courtroom that just say, this woman is a nightmare for a father.
Well, I'm going to agree with you that certainly in my case she was a nightmare, but what's interesting is in a recusal motion, she doesn't even have to be impartial. Just the potential for her being impartial.
Which is unusual, just so the viewers know, when you file for a recusal, it's hard to believe, but the person you're asking to recuse, that person rules on it. So
that's right.
This motion isn't in front of a third party where you present evidence and say, look, it appears that this person has a bone to pick with me or is biased against me. You're asking the same person to basically admit that she hasn't been fair.
That's correct.
I mean, what a crazy system is that? So what happened with the motion that you filed?
Well, if I can, I actually have some of the recusal law with me, and if I could read just one or two sentences, would you mind?
Sure,
would that be okay? So this is the law on recusals. It's set up by the rules of the chief administrator of the courts. It's called 22 NYC-RR Part 100, and it basically states, a judge shall uphold the integrity and independence of the judiciary. A judge shall avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all the judge's activities. And there's a lot of other things, but let me just say a couple of quick sentences. It is well settled law in New York that the state is bound to furnish every litigant not only an impartial judge, but one who has not, by any acts of his, justified a doubt of his impartiality. And that's Moores versus Gilbert. But even more important, the federal courts have also concurred on these issues. A party who petitions for recusal against ask a judge to disqualify themselves need not demonstrate the appearance of impartiality beyond a reasonable doubt. All that is required is some kind of probative evidence. Matter searches of conduct of March 5th, 1980. basically, I don't have to prove my case.
Well, just the fact that the transcripts show that she's not giving you, she's trying to take away your rights.
That's right.
By intimidating you with the attorney, this nonsense that she did before, the fact that she refuses to give you these credits. I mean, what more do you need?
Well, that was even before the credit issue. So I filed this motion in December of 2013, and we were supposed to be back in her court on January 6th. On January 6th, I came to her court. I didn't have an attorney. I couldn't afford one. We set another date, and she told me right then and there that when you have an attorney, we will determine whether or not your motion is granted or denied. So we come back again a couple of weeks later, and she tells me, because I'm pro se still, that the motion for recusal is denied, but she does it orally. And she does,
which means you can't appeal it.
Which means I can't appeal it. She forces me to go through a 20-some-odd day or 12-day, I forget the number, somewhere between 12 and 20 days worth of hearings. And she finally issues an order on February 3rd, which she doesn't even mail till February 14th, that basically says, denied. My recusal motion is denied. The trier of fact is the sole arbiter of the recusal. And again, like you said, it's her decision.
Right.
So now we're into this hearing process. Now it's where it starts to get really bad for me
and from what I've
for
seen,
the fathers.
Do you think this woman is trying to retaliate now because she came in with her bias, but now she's even more pissed off that you filed this recusal motion? Did you get a sense that she was just nasty consistently throughout this whole thing, and you felt there was a bias? Because it doesn't seem like she's giving you a fair shake.
You know, Gary, all I try to do is live my life righteously. And all I ask is for fairness, equality under the law. If I lose something because of its merits, then so be it, and I'm good with that. But I didn't have a chance going into this thing.
Right.
So now we're in this hearing process, and not only will she not recognize my credits, but when I start to explain to the judge why the credits are there and why she's interpreting the judgment and the decision incorrectly, she has the audacity to preclude and bar me from discussing it any further.
Which is just so the viewers know, this is something that I would say that she's stupid. She's not stupid. She knew exactly what she was doing, because what they do is you're trying to preserve the record so you can go up to a higher court. And you could even sit here today on the show and say, look, I showed her this, and this, and she ignored it. But by precluding you from talking about it, now if you just read the decision, you would say, well, of course she made the right decision. The man didn't even present evidence. Well, she stopped you from presenting evidence.
Not only did she stop me, but if I presented evidence, she could have found me in contempt of court and put me in jail.
Which, by the way, that's denying you. I mean, I'm not an attorney, you're not an attorney, but to me, this is basic denial of due process. You should be allowed to present your case. She doesn't have to like what you say.
I agree.
She doesn't have to rule in your favor. That's why you go up to a higher court. But the fact that she's precluding you from presenting your case, especially when you're pro se, is really, really violating your constitutional right to due process.
Well, not only did she violate this, but now all of a sudden I go into this thing thinking that I'm in the green, that my ex-to-be actually owes me money, or there's more credits than what I owe her.
Right. Which would make you be allowed to survive.
Which I'd be okay with. And all of a sudden, because she wipes away 6 figures worth of credits, I'm in the deep hole of $100,000 that I owe her.
Which is probably accruing interest.
Which wasn't accruing interest at the time because there wasn't a money judgment.
Okay.
But I now can be found willful and be put in jail because I owe her this $100,000.
Right.
And she actually made this decision. She ruled on it. I tried to get her to allow me to argue it, but she barred me, she precluded me, and I actually gave parts of the transcript, or I can give you the whole transcript of where she does this 6 or 7 times in a matter of minutes, stating that I can't do these things. So now we continue on, and I'm in real trouble because she forces us to do this hearing, and I owe $100,000 in child support and spousal support of money I don't have. Okay, we'll figure it out, but she says she's not going to find me willful on it. So I'm okay, which means I'm not going to go to jail. But then she issues an order. And the order she issues is on that same date as the order that she won't recuse herself. She writes, the caption of the order is, decision and order on consent.
Which so the viewers know, that means you agreed you agreed to everything, basically.
Right.
So there's no argument. You're saying, hey, whatever the judge said, I agreed to, which of course would mean there's no way you could appeal it, because an appellate court would look at it and say, well, why is he appealing it? The man consented to it, which
Right.
means agreed to it.
Correct. Except in her on her second page, she actually writes, over objection by the respondent, I'm the respondent, this court ruled on the one contested issue. Wait a second.
Which one is it?
Well, it's the
Is
one
it on
about the
consent,
credits.
or is it against you're not consenting and you're arguing it?
Right.
Which
so
one is it?
How can something be on consent, but yet she ruled over objection?
Well, I'll tell you how it is, because my opinion, she's lazy. She took an order, copied it and pasted it in there, and threw it out there. But what they don't realize is these orders, that's all you have is the record.
Well, it gets worse. Because when I got these orders, attached to it is, if you don't like the order, you can file an objection with a family court judge. So within so many days, I think it's 30 days. So I spent the next 20 some odd days writing an objection saying, look, this is what happened. Here's the transcript. How can something be on consent if it's ruled on by the
That should
judge?
be a black and white issue that there's a mistake.
Right. So I filed that objection, and 3 days later, the family court judge stamps it denied, because you can't object to a family court on consent order. Excuse me. So I'm going.
And you're objecting to the fact that she said it was on consent.
Right.
So you're stuck in a circle.
In a circle.
Which is their plan, of course, to screw you. We're running a little bit short on time, so
Can I get real quickly to the 1 minute?
Okay, go quick. We got a minute left.
I'm sorry. So then the only option I had was to go to the appellate division, and I filed an appeal. But because I am now broke, unemployed, I'm homeless, I asked for poor person status so I can perfect my appeal. Denied.
Which is ridiculous, too. I mean, if you just think about it, you're on public assistance. I'm sure they investigated to see if you're scamming the system. So it's okay for them, and they're the ones who investigated. Yet the higher court says, well, we don't believe that he's really poor, and we're going to deny the process. In the short amount of time, I just want people to realize the damage. You know, it sounds like, okay, the woman made a mistake, she's nasty, it sucks, the guy got a bad deal. Because of this, where are you now? What did this one order, what did this judge do to you?
Well, basically, I had to pack up everything I owned. I was renting a home that was somewhat funded through external means. I am now on public assistance. I'm living in a bedroom in somebody else's house where the Department of Social Services in Suffolk County pays for my rent. They pay for my automobile insurance. I have food stamps. I have Medicaid. I was self-sufficient. I hadn't asked for a penny from the county. But all of a sudden, I went from being someone who was going to fight these battles so I could go and appeal the credits and issues, all that again, to being so downtrodden that I have time to breathe. And if it wasn't for the support of my friends, I don't think I'd actually be here today.
And I think I want to say, this is not something that somebody's just saying. I went there personally to the court, Long Island backstory. We have press pass, and we did go to the court. I went there myself and tried to sit in to see what's happening firsthand, see the demeanor, because a transcript doesn't necessarily show the demeanor of the judge. And let me tell you, this woman tried to intimidate me. She took a press pass that I had and said, I'm making a copy of that. She wanted to know if it was issued by the government. Let me tell you, she doesn't do that to News 12. She doesn't do that to the New York Times. I have a right to be there as a member of the press. I have the right to be there as a supporter of Mr. Wiener. Anybody in the public has the right to be in that courtroom. This woman tried to intimidate me because she didn't want us to see what was going on. And in fact, coming up, we have a hearing where I was now forced to retain an attorney to represent me in a hearing as to whether or not I can be there, because it's just not right. We went to the chief judge, Judge Freundlich, who blew us off also. He's part of the same problem here. Again, I just want to reiterate, this is my opinion that this judge is biased against fathers. To me, it's clear, but that's my opinion. I'm not an attorney. It's the opinion of Mr. Wiener that she's a biased judge. It's the opinion of many other people. You can just read the reviews about this horrible woman online. Look for yourself. You can send me an email. The number is on the bottom of the screen. You can reach out to Mr. Wiener to get more information. But we have to get rid of people, of judges like Aletha Fields. We have to do what we did with Marion McNulty and never stop until this woman is gone. Put the political pressure up. This woman is destroying lives. I'm not saying she should be for fathers and not for mothers. I'm asking that this woman should be fair. And clearly, her mistake, which I don't think it's a mistake, but I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say it's a mistake. She should have corrected it. Instead, she let somebody go from being a productive member of society to now every single one of us is now paying for Mr. Wiener because his life has been destroyed. This is the first part of a two-part series that we're going to be doing on this judge. I welcome anybody else who has a story about this judge. Again, reach out to me on Facebook. You can just search for Long Island Backstory. You can Google us. Come to me with more stories. We're going to be at the courthouse doing stories on her, and we're going to be doing other stories in the studio. We are not going to let this end. We're going to do a follow-up. Don, thanks for coming to the show.
Gary.
Good luck to you. Hopefully this will all work out, and you will finally see justice.
Alibi.